Very cool. What's up, guys? Casey here with the Coyote Works channel. Hey, I've got a great video coming up for you in just a minute, but before I roll the video, I wanted to let you know that I did put a PayPal donate link down in the description below. I get requests and messages from people all the time asking about how they can contribute and support my channel financially. And honestly, the best way is, if you can or you feel like it, throw a couple of bucks in what I'm calling the tip jar by hitting that link below. If you're not in a position to, man, don't sweat it. No pressure, no obligation. Just stick around and enjoy the content. For those of you that do contribute, just know how much I appreciate it, and know that 100% of your contributions will go directly into all of the stuff that it takes to keep editing video and doing my best to provide the content that you guys enjoy. So, with that said, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I can already feel the heat starting to radiate off the ground. I bet it's going to be a hot one today. It's just about 6 o'clock in the morning and I already feel this kind of heat, so I bet it's going to be pushing 90 today. My first cup of coffee this morning, just a little bit of instant coffee shaken up in a water bottle. Breathe a little life into me. I'm going to go on a little nature walk this morning. We had a cool little canyon up here, so I'm going to go check that out a little bit. And we'll come back and make some real coffee and some breakfast. I'm just out on a morning walk and I came across this dry kind of wash, but you can dig down about 6 inches or so and there's water, but I'm finding all kinds of bits of obsidian and jasper and various kinds of agate in here. So I'm thinking that this was a pretty major hunting spot for the natives. So I think I'm going to hike up out of the wash and see if I can head back up it a little bit. But man, it is just amazing out here this morning. All right, so George is our fearless leader today. Right now we just came up out of the little valley that we camped in and we're heading up across the plateau. I think the next kind of thing of interest will probably be, we'll start dropping down into the Oahe for our first crossing. But up until then, I think it's just going to be some sagebrush on the right side of the road, some sagebrush on the left side of the road, some sagebrush in front of us, a view for a long ways on the right, a view for a long ways on the left, a view for a long ways in front, and sagebrush as far as the eye can see behind us. I like either being in the front of the pack or the rear of the pack. Those are kind of my two favorite positions to be in. Other than that, I'm all jacked up on caffeine and looking forward to the day of adventure. So we believe the majority of these routes that we're following today are historic routes, and one of the reasons why we believe these more modern roads are following the historic routes is because there's only a handful of places where you can cross back and forth across these various forks of the Oahe River. So there's only a few possibilities for routes to go. And we know from reading and studying the history out here that some of the trails we're following are historic routes, and then we suspect other ones are. So right now, we're following one of the few paths that leads down the bottom of this canyon to a crossing down here. So these routes connected a lot of the mining districts to each other, like Silver City, Winnemucca, Elko, places like that that had a lot of mining activity in the surrounding areas. A lot of these routes were the freight routes, and they were just the travel routes back and forth between those communities. And back when these routes were established, basically what they generally did was they followed the path of least resistance. Even when it was a much longer distance, they didn't have the technology we have today to do massive scale construction projects. So they tended to kind of follow more of the contours of the land and take advantage of places where there were natural crossings of rivers and passes through mountains, things like that. All right, well, we just made a stop here at this old historic ranch down on the bottom of this canyon, and our next step is we'll be headed back up in there. But this is a pretty neat old building here. Would have been a pretty amazing operation back in its day. There's a couple of more modern buildings here too, but this old stone building behind me, I'm pretty sure is the original homestead from here. One of the coolest things about that site was the evidence and the relics that showed all the years of occupation of the site. Some of the earliest signs indicated that it was probably settled in the late 1800s, but there were containers there all the way up into, I'm going to say, like the 1960s and the 1970s. I love old cans and old containers. I just feel like they're such a cool window into the past. And it was neat to see so many well-preserved ones inside those structures. Truly a place that's so remote that not many people have had the opportunity to pillage or disturb what was left there. Definitely one of the high points of the trip. I could have easily spent another couple of hours or even a day down there kicking around that old homestead site, but soon we were back on the trail. George had us on a tight schedule and we had a lot of miles to cover that day. We also would have several river crossings, which we weren't 100% sure what the water levels would be like. So the next stretch of trail would take us up out of the creek bottom, across the high plateau, and then drop us back down into one of the main branches of the river, where we would eventually come to our first river crossing. As we worked our way gradually following the canyons downstream, the terrain got more and more extreme and we started seeing more and more prolific canyons cut into the landscape. Really just incredible landscapes out there. Eventually we dropped down off of the high plateau, back into the river bottom, and started working our way closer to our first river crossing of the day. All right, we're just down here scouting to see what the crossing looks like. So after scouting the crossing, it was apparent that none of us were going to have any problem fording the river at that point. So for entertainment, Jamie and I somehow managed to coerce Sarah into sitting in the back of the truck and operating the camera and filming my Jeep making the crossing. So kudos to Sarah, she did an awesome job filming in a pretty what you would call an unstable environment. So nice work, Sarah, thank you, and it ended up being a pretty cool shot. And just on the other side of the river, we came to our next set of ruins, where we decided to take a quick little rest stop. All right, another little stop here at a old homestead location. There's actually been some more modern ranching use of this too. You can see over there's a grain elevator, or not a grain elevator, a grain bin. So that's from more modern times, but still not really new. That probably was put here in the 50s, 60s maybe. But pretty cool old stone ruins back there. After leaving that homestead site, our next section of trail would be a long pull up out of the river bottom. We would cross another high plateau and then again drop down into the river bottom for our second river crossing of the day. That pull up out of the river bottom from that last homestead ruin was one of the longest, most sustained sections of somewhat technical, steep trail that we would encounter for the trip. And I'm really glad we got an opportunity to get up out of there, because I don't know how many more years that trail will even be passable. It's slowly but surely eroding away, and it's on a steep enough slope that if it gets in much worse condition, it's just not going to be passable anymore. Also, huge thanks to Tess from Southwest Idaho Overlanding for not only her expert camera skills, but her willingness to walk most of that hill filming us. This is the Oahe Canyon, and it's just a really picturesque canyon carved into the high plateaus out here, and just thought you guys might appreciate seeing that. I know things never look as cool on video as they do in person, but hope you enjoy that for a minute. All right, here we go. We are getting ready to drop down for our second crossing of the Oahe today. We just stopped up on top, had some lunch. Amazing views from up here. And, well, we'll see. This could be a little bit of a technical drop down here, but we just never know until we get in the middle of it. Yeah, this is pretty steep here. Pretty tight switchbacks, but so far not too technical from a rocky perspective. Well, you wouldn't want to start into a slide though. A short time later, we eventually dropped back down to the river and were embarking on our final river crossing for the day, which proved to be a pretty fun one.
Let's see it, Casey.
Again, no one really struggled much with the river crossing, though it was decently deep. But one of the coolest things to see was Donald from Soft Roading the West fording that stretch of the river in his little Subaru.
Hi, I'm Donald. My YouTube channel is Soft Roading the West, and I do a lot of exploring in the Oregon backcountry in my Subaru, and a lot of DIY, overland, camp kind of stuff. So that's pretty much the gist of my channel.
All right, guys, this is the end of, let's see, day 3, going into night 3, and we are camped down at a place called Three Forks, and this is a crossing on the Oahe River, and apparently it's a really popular location. So this is definitely not the typical place that I usually camp at, and this reminds me why I just stay away from places where other people go to. It's just the strangest things to me to come way out to some place like this and then have people like camped right next to each other. There is quite a bit of activity down here, so I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'm going to try to grab a little bit of sleep. Got another day tomorrow, actually a long day tomorrow for me, a lot of miles tomorrow. So that's all from me, guys, for tonight. Coyote Works out. I'll see y'all in the morning for coffee. Well, good morning, guys. Well, I'm down here. The cool thing about this area, Three Forks, is there's all these warm springs coming out of the rim rocks behind us. So I'm sitting right now at about, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning inside a warm stream that just runs right out of the mountain. Yeah, this water is like bathtub temperature, man. This is just perfect. And there's dozens of these over across the river. We've got them pouring out of the rocks over there. There's a place over there where you can literally stand underneath it and have a shower cascading down on you. Look at this, guys. I have this perfect little bathtub right here. Nice rocky bottom here, so it is literally just like sitting in a bathtub. we're just surrounded by some impressive geological features, just these sheer canyon walls. The sun's just starting to hit the upper walls of the canyon. When I first woke up this morning, I could see a couple of antelope up on the plateau up there. So it's just a pretty incredible spot down here. So if you're running that route, like running east-west from Idaho across the eastern Oregon desert, this would be a great stop, a great place to spend the night, get cleaned up, bathe in the warm springs, and it's a nice spot to rest and relax. So this is Three Forks, and Three Forks is about 40-45 miles or so, I think, south of Jordan Valley. Now I came up from the south, so we'll be going out to the north. So I don't know exactly how far it is, but it's a fairly easy drive from what I understand from Jordan Valley. But really cool spot. In addition to all of the warm springs down here and all the cool places to camp, on the other side of the canyon over there, you guys can see there's an old historic road coming down. And I'm not sure the history of it, but in a little bit we'll talk to George from Southwest Idaho Overland, and I'm going to ask him, and he probably knows the history of it. He knows the history of a lot of these old roads and stuff in this country. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to get dressed and we'll wander over to where everybody else is camped, and we'll sit down and ask George if he can tell us a little bit about the history of this crossing down here. All right, so before we take off, I wanted to ask you, George, about I can see this old historic road behind us back here, and I figured you would know a little bit about the significance of that.
Yes, this road was built in the 1860s by the military to get supplies from California to Silver City, and it was called the Old Military Road for many, many years. Still, well, actually still is called the Military Road to some people.
That was originally a road that was traversed by wagons and horses pulling horses and or oxen pulling wagons.
They used freight wagons, which were 30-mule teams generally, and they would pull the freight through these canyons here. It would take them a day to get to the bottom, a day to traverse the bottom of the canyon, and then another day to climb back out. So it would take them 3 days
just to get from the top on that side to the top on that side.
And so that gives you an idea. I mean, the train we traveled in 3 days and what they would travel in 3 days.
And one thing I noticed too is there's a lot of rock work back there, and so all of that rock work happened by hand, like sheer manual labor is what they did all that with. Every single one of those rocks that makes up that retaining wall was set in place. A person held onto that rock and set it into place.
Every rock has a piece of history behind it.
Yep. Where's the other Idaho contingent?
We were making out.
What? I keep telling you guys not to do that.
So is that the squeaking that I heard last night? It is bumpy.
So we're on kind of the last leg of our journey. We had a good night down here last night. I think everybody got baths and some array of hot springs, and we got all the vehicles. I can't believe we got your Subaru across the river twice. Boarded the river twice, and that was a team effort. The second time getting everybody on standby. So just real quick, I want to make sure that you guys got a chance to meet everyone on this trip. So you probably know these two characters.
Jamie.
And Sarah.
And what's your guys' claim to fame?
Driving an old 70s vehicle as far and deep as we can go.
And you guys came twice to the Coyote Works group Overland trip.
Yes.
Brought that truck.
This is a much smaller group than those two.
We've got Caleb and Tess. And you guys have been running cameras back and forth and hiking in front of the vehicles. Got Brian, same deal, holding cameras, spotting.
Not crossing the river.
Not this time.
Not this one.
Time.
A little too deep.
Newer Nissan though. The Nissan did awesome. Got through some gnarly terrain, and
yeah, she did good.
I have a feeling the next time I see that Nissan, it's probably going to have a snorkel and a lift kit in it.
It's already lifted
and
a
what?
little bit.
Traction device.
And traction device.
No, it's getting a locker first before it gets a snorkel.
And Donald, you enjoyed the trip?
Fantastic. Really, really glad I was able to meet up with you guys, yeah.
Awesome. So I just want to encourage you guys, we'll catch a little film on the way out, but make sure you check out George's YouTube channel, Southwest Idaho Overlanding, Donald's YouTube channel.
Soft Roading the West.
We're out of here. We're going to make some tracks, guys. Coyote Works, out.
Oh.
And that was it. Without much further ado, we started one last long pull up out of the Canyonlands, which for me would be the very beginning of a long trip back home. There was very little to be disappointed about on that trip, and in true fashion of the Canyonlands, even that last leg of our journey held some spectacular landscapes.
Sorry, Casey, she's just an old tank.
No worries, man, no hurry. We crisscrossed back and forth a couple of little tributary streams, worked our way uphill, passed a couple more historic ranches, and soon we broke out up on the plateau again. Alright guys, well we are on our first 40-mile-an-hour road of the entire trip, I think. We are on our way. We're going to come out at Jordan Valley. All of us are running really lean on fuel. We had to do some swapping and trading around, and thanks to Donald from Soft-Roading the West, he had a couple extra gallons that he didn't need for a Subaru. So we dumped that in my Jeep, so I'm feeling a lot better. My fuel light's not on anymore. And anyway, we'll come out at Jordan Valley, and then I've got about another 5-6 hours from Jordan Valley back to my home. So I don't know how much more filming I'll do, guys, but it was an awesome trip. Really enjoyed hanging out with some different people. It's always good to see George, Jamie, Sarah, Caleb, Tess. Everyone just did an awesome job, and then the icing on the cake was getting a chance to meet Donald at the very end of the trip. So I know it wasn't my best work as far as filming. It's always more difficult to film when you're in a group situation, but
We're just stopping a sec to take it out of 4.
sometimes you gotta just enjoy the road and put the cameras away and just enjoy the experience. Alright, so we're doing a quick stop to air up, and I'm trying a new compressor. This is a little handheld Makita air compressor, so I'm just going to give it a try. My tires are down around 22 pounds right now, so we're going to see how long it takes to air them up, and I'm hoping that maybe this will be a compressor that I can use. Now, one thing that's cool about it is it takes the same batteries as my battery operated chainsaw. So let's see how this thing works. Alright, so that's not actually that bad. That was about a little over 2 minutes to go from 22 to 34. Alright, well that little compressor actually works pretty good. It's not the fastest one in the world, but I took all 4 of my tires from 22 psi up to 35 psi, and the compressor didn't seem to get overly hot, and yeah, so I think that thing's good to go. And what I really like about it is it takes the same batteries as my chainsaw. Now I've got the chainsaw and the compressor, which are 2 pretty integral pieces of kit that both take the same batteries, so pretty stoked about that. A short distance after airing up, our tires touched pavement for the first time since 4 days ago. This would be the last leg of the journey that we would spend together. We would travel a short distance farther, and eventually we would hit Jordan Valley. At Jordan Valley, everyone else would peel off and go to Idaho in the east, and I would turn back west, headed for Prineville. I hope all of you enjoyed joining me for my trip down into the Canyonlands. I know I sure enjoyed having all of you along. I look forward to your comments, your questions, and above all, to seeing you all on the next adventure. And until then, Coyote Works, out.